You are terminated.
These videos are not for children. If you're a children, then piss off.
I've been waiting for you.
Hey there, it's me, your least favorite YouTuber, the Infuso. And I kinda love the Terminator. My only problem with it is that I also kind of hate the Terminator. It's a series that made me fall in love with it almost immediately, and then instantaneously made me regret that decision. It's a very toxic relationship that I and many other fans have with the franchise. We keep going back to it and giving it another chance, but deep down, we know it'll never be as good as it once was. We're just constantly setting ourselves up for the same disappointment over and over and over again, because we never learn our damn lesson. We want to hold on to our nostalgia, but we don't want to admit that the product presently sucks. We want to hope that it's gonna get better, even though we know it won't. Now, before I get into all of this, I just want to make one thing clear. Today, I'm talking about the Terminator movies, and the movies only. We're not talking about the comic books, the video games, TV series, all of that is off the table for now. And I will be shelving those for a later date, should you all decide that this is something you'd like to see. In the meantime, let's get right into the death of something beautiful.
Da 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 da. Da 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 da. Da 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 da. Da 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 da.
The Terminator is a very complex franchise to say the very least. The first movie essentially boils down to an extended chase sequence, just with the runtime of a movie, and that sounds underwhelming, but in execution, it's actually really great. A seemingly unstoppable android from the future travels to the past to kill the mother of the future resistance leader, all before he's born. Meanwhile, Kyle Reese, another resistance fighter, is also sent back in time to ensure the birth of that leader, by protecting his mother, Sarah Connor. And ensure that birth he does, by not only keeping Sarah Connor alive, but by also getting it on with her and getting her pregnant with the future resistance leader himself. Which apparently was not in the job description, but hey, this is a guy who really just goes above and beyond. Interestingly enough, this means that John's mother would have given birth to him before his father was ever born. This has all the makings of what could be the greatest Steve Wilkos episode never made. There's a lot of interesting dynamics and questions posed in this movie. I'm not sure a lot of them get answered, but they are posed in passing. It is an absolute classic. And the last I checked, this movie actually has a 100% approval rating on Rotten Tomatoes. That's not really something that usually happens. This movie is a must-see if you somehow haven't already. And yet, despite that, this isn't what made the franchise so iconic. That comes later. Sooner later, rather than later. Then again, what do I know? My whole concept of timelines is all kinds of fucked up due to these movies. The second installment in this unintended ongoing series is T2 Judgment Day. And that's where the series really gains its legendary status that it's known for. The reason we still talk about Terminator to this day is because of Terminator 2. Because it was a movie that turned everything we knew about the world of Terminator, past, present, and future, in on itself. The T-800, the type of Terminator that tries to exterminate Sarah Connor in the last movie, returns not trying to kill the future leader of the Resistance, but is sent in an attempt to save the future leader of that Resistance. Sarah Connor, who is the damsel in distress of the first movie, has now become a full-blown badass and action hero. When you keep in mind the trauma that she experienced in the first movie, along with the knowledge that she's been given by Kyle Reese from the first movie, the whole ordeal makes it feel like a reasonable evolution. She wasn't gonna sit back and wait for some other guy from the future to come back and save her. She was gonna save herself. And this evolution of the character doesn't feel forced, it feels very much earned. There's something seriously authentic watching Linda Hamilton portray a complete badass. I buy it. And even at her present age, not somebody I'm fucking with. I mean, maybe I could take her, but I'm not looking to find out. And the bad guy of this movie is an updated Terminator model, the T-1000, who spends his entire runtime dressed as a cop. And back then, they were the good guys. It challenges your knowledge on the story, and it adds more layers by adding in John Connor. I could go on and on about how great this movie is and all the things that go into it that make it so great, and I'd really like to do that in the relatively near future. Once again, if that's something you're interested in, let me know in the comment section below. Terminator 3 Rise of the Machines is where the franchise started on a downhill slope. Firstly, they had the very unfortunate task of following up one of the greatest movies of all time. And then added on to that, they had to try to follow one of the greatest movies of all time without a lot of what made the first two movies so great. Remember Sarah Connor? Well, you're gonna have to, because remembering her is all that anybody in this movie could do. Because at this point, she is very much dead. As was Linda Hamilton's relationship with James Cameron. The T-1000? Well, he died in the last movie. We're not gonna bring him back. Did you like Edward Furlong as John Connor? Well, I hope not, because we have Nick Stahl in the role. Nick Stahl. More like Nick Stale. Am I right?
Jesus.
No? Okay, I'll continue. Sure, they brought Arnold back, but he's not the same Terminator that was in the last movie.
This is same Terminator.
You know, the one that you were endeared to? Not it. Completely different one. Same face, just different Terminator.
This is same Terminator.
Do you even remember me? Sarah Connor, blowing up Cyberdyne, hasta la vista, baby.
That was a different T-101.
Oh man, I'm gonna have to teach you everything all over again.
Different Terminator. Get used to that statement because it's going to be said a couple times in this video. The new big bad of the Terminator franchise was the TX. The first ever Lady Terminator. Well, the first official Lady Terminator. That one doesn't count. We're not talking... Come on. She wasn't bad per se, but the character didn't have a whole lot of time to be good. She's just kind of there. The movie's pretty bland, and it feels like a really tired take on the Terminator franchise. Which makes sense as to why everyone's sleepwalking through their performances. I think the ending of the movie is pretty interesting, but I think it's the only part of the movie worth watching. And even with this climax, I don't know if the rest of the movie is worth sitting through to get to it. Terminator Salvation, to its credit, is at least something a little bit different. Maybe because it was forced to be, what with Arnold Schwarzenegger being too busy being the Governator to be the Terminator. But I think this movie is probably the most underappreciated of all the Terminator sequels. Salvation is completely different to the original trilogy, and it puts a spotlight on elements of the franchise that have either previously been glossed over or only spoken in passing. As opposed to referencing the apocalypse, the characters are now living it. We get to see the John Connor of legend realized, in the role that was prophesized for him. And you know what? I think Christian Bale really makes it work. Sure, at times I feel like he was unnecessarily screamy and prone to outbursts.
No, don't just be sorry. Think for one fucking second. The fuck are you doing? Da-da-da-da like this in the background. What the fuck is it with you?
But I think he did a really good job at what he was given. I'm actually a little bit surprised that this movie didn't get its own trilogy. I think I would have preferred that for the franchise rather than the route that they wound up taking, which was attempting to cash in on nostalgia by completely disregarding continuity. There's a lot different about this Terminator movie. For one, the Terminator isn't the main focus in a Terminator movie. The Terminators are just the enemies of the movie. This is very much a John Connor movie. And now we're not dealing with people and robots traveling from the future to the past. We're dealing with people and robots of the future. And that past is already past. This time, instead of Kyle Reese coming to the future to keep his son John Connor safe, John Connor is in the present trying to keep his father Kyle Reese safe to ensure his own existence and the existence of the human race in the future. I think a lot of people are indifferent to this movie, but compared to what came next and even the entry that came before it, I think it merits a second watch and a second chance. Terminator Genisys, while being the fifth movie to come out, isn't the fifth installment canonically. It's instead the first soft reboot. It's a movie that erases the last two movies from its canon and chooses to put the first two movies up on a pedestal, which on some level is kind of understandable. The last two entries have been meh at best. I get the idea of going back to the first two movies that are so beloved by so many people and trying to continue the franchise from there. It's a great idea and concept, but it's pretty piss poor in execution, because this movie is by far worse than the last two movies. As a matter of fact, you take the suckage from Terminator 3 and the suckage from Terminator Salvation, erase any of the good parts, combine them together, and it still wouldn't be half as bad as Terminator Genisys. It's bad. Like really bad. Like, it's questionable who would have thought this would be good kind of bad. This movie is really confused about its own identity. It tries to be a nostalgia trip of the first two movies, like it constantly gushes over the finer points of its continuity, all while actively changing that continuity. In trying to celebrate the first two movies, it completely erases the canon of those movies while establishing a significantly worse one. The movie doesn't just retcon the Terminator 3 and 4, it winds up retconning all of the Terminator movies that came before it before the credits roll. They change the events of everything in the franchise, and they do so with actors who are significantly less memorable in their roles. Look, I'm not saying these actors suck. As a matter of fact, I've seen both of these actors in things that I've liked them in. So no, I'm not saying they're not good actors, I'm saying they're not good replacements. The movie Terminator Genisys is trying to do way too much at once, and none of it is working. The things that almost work in this movie are just cheap rehashes of things that have already worked much better in the originals. Once again, this movie has the same problem as Terminator 3.
That was a different T-101.
Yet another Terminator, once again played by Arnold Schwarzenegger, that we need to learn to love. Of course, with every entry, less and less effort is put into endearing the audience to Arnie. Because I guess those in charge felt the groundwork has already been done by the previous movies, but that doesn't really make sense when you consider that the previous entries don't exist anymore, and it really wasn't the same Terminator to begin with anyway in each and every movie, so really, Arnie is just a stranger with a familiar face. And quite frankly, I don't like the way that face is looking at me right now. Finally, you have Terminator Dark Fate, the latest and hopefully last entry in the Terminator films. And wouldn't you know it, this movie once again retcons all of the movies after the second one. And once again, we have yet another Terminator played by Arnie that somehow grew a conscience. It wasn't even reprogrammed, it just woke up one morning and decided it was good. You see what I mean when I say they're trying less and less with every installment? It just feels like it's all done just to make the Terminator one of the good guys, because he was the good guy in the second movie. And people really liked the second movie, but what you're forgetting is that people didn't like the third, fourth, fifth, and now the sixth movie, but you're still doing the same shit! You also have Linda Hamilton finally returning to the series as Sarah Connor, which is nice to see. I think the better moments of this movie include her, and it's kinda cool to see her kicking android ass all these years later. This movie does actually try to take its time and make newer characters to potentially give the franchise to, but it's not great. The lead feels a little bit bland and kinda becomes a background character in the bigger scheme of things, especially after the nostalgia act is introduced to the movie, and then they just become not important despite being a focal point in the script. The most interesting new character sacrifices herself, a la Terminator 2, and then so does the old Terminator, a la Terminator 2. If I'm being honest about this movie, it's not nearly as bad as a lot of people would have you believe. I know a lot of people said, this is the worst, this is the absolute worst. And you are so wrong in saying that, because this movie is definitely light years ahead of Terminator Genisys. Though again, that is a pretty low bar to set. I wouldn't exactly celebrate that and call it a victory. That's more of a wipe the sweat off your brow and murmur to yourself, thank God, kind of moment. It's not great, but it's not awful. And it's definitely not the T-800 comeback that a lot of us were hoping for. If I had to rank all these movies from worst to best, that list would probably look something like this. As a matter of fact, it would look exactly like this. This is the list. This is how I'd rank the Terminator franchise overall. Let me know your rankings in the comment section below. And now comes the time where I have to decipher what day this series died. When did the Terminator meet its own Judgment Day? Well, on Judgment Day. I'm sure this probably isn't a controversial opinion. Those of y'all hoping for another one of V's hot takes, you might be a little bit let down here, because this one's lukewarm. Everyone seems to agree with this one. For me, the franchise was dead after Judgment Day. Everything since then has desperately tried to recapture the magic of the first two movies, and failed in epic proportions, for one simple fact. Terminator 2 ended the original narrative. The story felt complete, and anything that came after it just felt tacked on after the fact. Because it was. Now don't get me wrong, I'm sure that Terminator 2 wasn't in the cards when they were making the first Terminator.
Fuck you, asshole.
But it felt like it was. Terminator 2 felt like a natural progression of the story. It felt like a true-to-tale what comes next. And there was a story to be told there. But then by the end of T2, it felt like that story had ended. and it had ended at a very logical closure point. It was a satisfying ending that was filled with sadness and hope and, most importantly, heart. All of the elements that have been severely missing from anything that came after it. All of these movies that have come out after T2 have been very evident cheap cash grabs, each one feeling more inauthentic than the last. The bleak future the Terminator movies described almost feel like metaphoric foreshadowing of the future of the franchise. What made Terminator 2, and by extension the first one, work so well, and made the story so compelling, was this learning cybernetic organism made to kill, learning to love. This manufactured robot learning what it means to be human through the relationship it builds and the bonds that it makes. This one Terminator, not just the movie, but this one Terminator in this Terminator movie, feels unique and special. But that same Terminator bites the dust at the end of the movie, leaving no room for that same beloved T-800 to make a return. Meaning every appearance since, excluding Salvation, has just been a copy and paste of the Terminator from 2 without any real understanding of what made that story work to begin with. A lot of, if not all of the sequels following T2, really just come off as bad fanfiction that was somehow greenlit for the big screen. Once again, with Genisys being the worst offender. John becomes Skynet and Arnie becomes the T-1000? Excuse me?
Excuse me, the fuck did you just say?
I think I favor Salvation more than a lot of these other ones, if only because it tried to do something different with the brand. You know, rather than just trying to recreate Terminator 2 like a lot of the other sequels, it attempted to be its own thing. And in a way, I think it kind of almost legitimizes the last two entries. But after, and even right before this, it's just the same old shit. And the constant bringing Arnold back to play another Terminator that the audience is supposed to instantly connect with, all because he played that one Terminator we really loved in that one Terminator movie all those years ago, even though he's not that Terminator anymore like 12 times over at this point, is ridiculous. It's almost on the same level as the show The Flash, bringing Tom Cavanaugh back to play 1 million different variants of the same character. And then some.
This is same Terminator.
Also, I find it really odd that they brought the same actor back every movie to technically play a new character, while at the same time they need to bring a new actor back every movie to play the same character. Honestly, at this point, it's kind of comical.
John.
For me, and I think for a lot of you too, feel free to let me know if I'm wrong, when Arnie went down in that pit of molten steel, he took the whole franchise down with him. Not to mention, at this point, they're just basically continually procrastinating Judgment Day. Like, the end of the world is gonna happen no matter what, but they just keep moving it off to a later date. There's no saving the world, there's just saving the world for now. If I had to recommend anything Terminator related to you guys following Terminator 2, it'd actually be this short made by Blinky Productions. A fan film which brings future John Connor of T2, Michael Edwards, back to the role. Like I mentioned, it's short, but it honestly feels pretty authentic in terms of a follow-up. I highly suggest checking it out if you have the chance. I'm leaving the link below in my description. Seriously worth the watch. So why don't you head on over, check it out, and don't forget to let them know who sent you. From the present to the present still. This metaphor doesn't work. So if you ask me, without question, Terminator 2 was the day the Terminator series died. And with all that being said, I was your least favorite YouTuber, Infuso, and I thank y'all for watching. Hope you'll be back. If you like this video and want to see more Terminator content here on this channel, let me know in the comment section below by saying,
I'll be back.
and until then,
Hasta la vista, baby.
Hasta la vista, baby.
I am vengeance. I am the night, and that was V Infuso. Just remember, if you're not tuning in, then you're missing out.
So, if you like the words that came out of his mouth hole, and you too would like to become a V-generate, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, nerds!
And if you're not joining the fun, you're in for one bad day. And you know what they say about having one bad day?
Catch him next time. Same bat time. same bat channel.
Do I want? No! No! Don't shut me up!